was tremendous. Write it down, back to that plan. What I did is I wrote down basically a PML, and I was doing it backwards, monthly and yearly, and it's a tough exercise because you're guessing. But when you're doing diligence and you kind of write things down, you're figuring out what's absolutely necessary and not. And when you see it in front of you, things make sense.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Adel Abraham. And Adel was originally raised in Kuwait and went to school in the U.S. in high school, and then went off to college at Case Western and wanted to be a lawyer. Had a tough time getting into law school. Ended up getting into law school, but with one of the lower ranked law schools, which I definitely understand. It's a tough journey, and having to do the LSAT is never a fun time. Graduated at the tail end of the financial crisis, and couldn't find much in the U.S. as far as employment with the financial crisis. Went back to Kuwait to work, and got exposed to a lot of different types of law, including litigation and business and other things. Also, within about 5 years, became general counsel for a wealthy individual. Made his way back to the U.S. to launch his own firm, and then within a few months has opened a few offices in the U.S. and one in Kuwait. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Adel.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you for the intro. I hate doing introductions, so I don't know how you do it.
I do my best. I try and condense a much longer journey into the 30-second version. So
that's great.
With that, so let's unpack your journey just a bit. So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in Kuwait.
Sure. So, I think that the entrepreneurial journey really sparked when I was in law school. I had a law office management class with a really good professor who still keep in touch today. And one of the projects, the final projects, actually was to develop a business plan. And that really got me thinking in terms of, away from traditionally what we are usually used to, and thinking, okay, go to school, get good grades, and go work for somebody else. It basically showed me through my own research that, I could do this too. And it always stuck with me. And after law school, market was tough.
Before we get too far into law school, just because I definitely will cover that part of the journey, but backing up just a little bit. So grew up in Kuwait, and then was it around the high school period that you guys moved into the U.S. or moved to the U.S.?
No, I graduated high school from there. So I went to an American school, Kuwait, and graduated from there and moved to Cleveland, Case Western. I went to Case Western for 4 years. So that was the time I moved back to the States. We're always back and forth anyways. Our family, most of my relatives are in the States. We're pretty spread out. So, that was my journey back from Kuwait.
Fair enough. So, and that makes sense. So you come to the U.S., go to school, Case Western. Interesting tidbit. So that's where I ended up doing law school. So I didn't do undergraduate. I did here in Utah. When I went to law school, I ended up going out to Case Western Reserve. So they're just always interesting to see where those connections may lie, and what that holds in store. But yeah, so I went there. So just always kind of fun to see that. So you were coming out of now undergraduate. What did you get the degree in?
So I dabbled in everything the first year. I took engineering courses, English and writing and science and all of that. And I figured out that I really like communication. I like people. I ended up taking more English courses and finally settled on management and finance. I had an inkling for business. I always have, and it just kind of turned out that I can do that, and that route was there for me, and I settled for that.
All right, so now you get some finance, some business, their schooling and undergraduate. Now, what made you decide to go off to do law school? Because I mean, certainly I went off to law school, know a lot of attorneys that did, but what was kind of the motivation saying, okay, now that I've got the undergraduate, I want to go get a law degree?
Well, I had family, relatives that were lawyers, so I knew firsthand what it was about, although they were, practicing in different areas. My father, the closest people to me was an attorney, so I saw that every single day. Um, but I couldn't see myself doing any other thing. So I don't like blood, so I can't be a doctor. Engineering and math, although I did finance, was not as I guess motivating for me. And I like communication. I like writing. I love talking to people, and law school seemed like the best fit for me. So that's where the decision came.
Fair enough. So now you say, okay, law school's a good fit, and have some people or family members that are in the legal industry, and think it'd be a good fit for me and a good opportunity. So now, as you're trying to figure out where to go to law school, and I said going through the less than fun process of studying for LSAS, of taking the score or taking the test, and then applying to all the schools, getting the rejection letters. I think when you mentioned, you said you had when we talked a bit before the podcast, you'd had a bit of a tough time getting to law school or finding one that matched up with you. Is that right?
Yeah. So I mean, through different parts of my life, it's also a story of perseverance. You'll have people that support you, but you have a lot of naysayers. With me during that time, I went through some rough patches, and it hurt my GPA. The LSAT was also something that got affected, so my options were limited. Um, Cooley gave me the opportunity, and even then, I had to go through a rigorous course, and even when I was admitted, finally I was on probation, just because of going through that sort of special admissions process that they had. Um, I came in with, I think it was a class of 1,200 people. So, it was pretty tough, and, managed to go through that and get through law school. So,
No, and I definitely get that. And I think, for me, it was, to go through law school, it's a bit of a different mindset when you're going through law school, and kind of making that shift and figuring how that out, and, going through the application process. But nonetheless, you got into law school, you made it through, you graduated, and you're coming out in the best time to get a job, which was no, not really the best time, but the financial crisis. And I was kind of one where I was, not by any, I guess just luck on my, or by luck on my own, not by any foresight. I was a couple years after the financial crisis had already ended, and so the market recovery. But all of the people that are graduating a couple years ahead of me were in that same boat. Of they were coming into or graduating with the financial crisis still in swing, and it wasn't a great time to get a job for anyone, including a newly graduated attorney. So definitely saw that as well. And that's kind of when you were coming out of law school. So now, as you're doing that, having a difficult time finding a job like many others are. So or how did you figure out what you were going to do in that environment?
well, at the end of law school, I had an externship. I was lucky enough to get it with a pretty big white collar firm in New York. So my last semester I spent in New York for school credit, working for one of the largest law firms in the world, White and Case. And I got my break working for a brilliant man. He was the administrative partner for their M&A department in New York City. And getting my feet wet with him in that type of work really solidified really what I wanted to do. I knew at that point, criminal was not the way I wanted to go. Civil litigation wasn't. I wanted to do transactional work and mergers and acquisitions, and work with big names and big companies and big deals. So that was the start of it. And coming out of law school, that's all that I was looking for. I didn't want to settle for anything else. I didn't want to settle for, another gig that, would just pay the bills. I wanted to do what I always wanted to do, and what drove me.
Nice, and that makes sense. So it's great, while you're in school, you're able to get internship, be a clerk or with the law firm. Now you're coming out, and I think as we chatted before, jobs weren't so plentiful in the U.S. and it pushed you or led you to going back to Kuwait in order to work there for a law firm for a period of years. Is that right?
Yeah, so for a few months it was, it was dry season, right? I couldn't find anything. The offers I was getting, I mean, even some firms were saying, well, we'll give you a paralegal position. And obviously I wasn't going to settle for that. So I made the decision to make the jump back to Kuwait, where, I grew up, my network was there. And, I was fortunate enough to land a job with at the time, it was the largest full service firm in Kuwait. And, the nature of law practice there and transactional practices, even at early stages of your career as young associates, you have exposure to a wide range of practice areas if you want it. And, they gave me that first opportunity. I'm always, forever grateful. And I learned a lot, and I kept pushing for that throughout my career, to kind of learn and never say no, to work and learn it, to get to where I want to get to.
I think that definitely makes sense. So now you're saying, okay, go to Kuwait, have the better, the better network, and that just, where you grew up, and have other supports. And then you're also saying, hey, in the U.S. can't, or job market's too tight, so I'm going to go, go a little bit where the jobs are, and so that all works out well. And so you worked, I think, with Kuwait for a period of time, and you got exposure to a lot of different types of law. You also got to work as general counsel for an individual for a period of time, and then eventually you came back to the U.S. Now, was that always the intent that you're going to come back to the U.S. and Kuwait was kind of that stopgap, or was there motivation, or what kind of or motivated you to come back to the U.S. after working working in Kuwait for a period of time?
Well, I always had the end goal in starting my own business and law firm in mind, but the timing was not clear. And I think when COVID happened, and the pandemic started, it kind of put a lot of things in perspective to a lot of people, including, myself, professionally, personally, and my family. Um, and it's a funny story. I mean, just a month before the pandemic hit us over there, my wife and I were actually sitting, we're sitting outside, and we were planning on moving apartments and buying a new car, and we had a 10-year plan to kind of move back to the States. And then fast forward a month into COVID, we had the same conversation, and we realized that, it's, doing what we were doing was not sustainable, and that 10-year plan turned into a 10-month plan. And, it really drove me to kind of, okay, now is the time. I have the experience. It's an opportunity, and let me make strides in moving back and setting up what I've always wanted to set up.
And that makes sense. So now you're just saying, okay, coming back to the US, gonna, or, get set up, or pursue what I want, or, pursue kind of what I always intended to do, and get that going. And so setting up your law firm, opening it up, having done or gone through it myself, it's no small task, and it takes, a lot of time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears and those type of things. So as you're opening that up, how did it go? Was it something where you had a lot of clients that came on quickly? It was one where you had to struggle for a bit? It was one where you found your niche, or kind of how did that go as you decided to take the plunge and go and start your firm?
Well, as you know, networking in our field is huge, and I think it goes, with most other types of businesses and stuff like that. But I've made an effort throughout my career to kind of build my network between clients and colleagues and others. And your reputation is gold in what we do. So I've, thankfully, I think I've maintained that, and I've had a good base of either former clients that I've worked with, or friends and other colleagues and other businesses that I was able to tap into to say, hey, listen, this is my plan. And, this is what I want to do. And I'd appreciate your support, and happy to work with you. And the feedback I got was tremendous. I had a lot of people I worked with in the past come back, and had I not asked, I wouldn't have known that they need legal support. And that was a good base to start in kind of planning this. The second part, which is really hard, is doing it, 6,000 miles away. So while I was working my day job at night, we're 7 hours and 8 hours ahead in winter of the US East Coast. That's when my day would start, and taking phone calls and interviews, and setting up the firm on a daily basis. So I'd be up till 12, 1, 2 in the morning until the day closes in the US, trying to figure things out and set things up.
No, and it sounds like, it was a lot of effort to get things going, but now it sounds like, to kind of catch up to a bit where you're at today, is you've opened up the firm. You've actually opened up a few different office locations, both here in the US and Kuwait, and continued to grow and expand. Is that right?
That's right. So, building it, I always had, part of that business plan I mentioned is the idea that I just don't want to, be a solo entrepreneur, right, or business owner. I want to expand, and I have larger ambitions, and I put that plan to action. Through other partners that I bring on board, and past relationships, building that sort of internal network under the umbrella of the firm is something that I developed early on, it's worked out so far. So I hope to continue to do that and follow my plan all the way through, and hopefully it continues to grow and be successful.
Sounds like a lot of good work in behind you, and a lot of exciting roads that are yet to come. So, well, with that, now as we've kind of reached the present point in your journey, and even hearing a little bit about what's to come, great time to transition to the two questions I ask at the end of each episode. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
The worst one was probably deviating from my plan. For the most part, I've stuck to it, but without getting into too many specifics, if there's always outside influence, there's always people that are suggesting, and not reminding myself that I put so many hours into developing a plan, and kind of disregarding it for someone else's opinion, or you should spend on this, or why don't you try this. That probably is the worst thing that I've done. It ended up being, aside from the financial cost, is the opportunity cost. Had I focused on something else that I've done my diligence in, and stuck to that, I think things may have turned out better. But I'm thankful for it, because the lesson of sticking to what I think is so important. And had that not happened, and it happened much later, when I was maybe when we were bigger, it would have been probably a bigger impact on me financially and professionally.
Hey, that's a great lesson to learn from a mistake made. So thank you for sharing that. So, second question I always ask now is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Write it down. Back to that plan. What I did is I wrote down basically a PML, and I was doing it backwards, monthly and yearly, and it's a tough exercise, because you're guessing. But when you're doing diligence and you kind of write things down, you're figuring out what's absolutely necessary and not. And when you see it in front of you, things make sense. From that, you could budget. From that, you could target, what sort of clients, and you can figure out pricing. If you work backwards from, your expense items on a month-to-month basis, you know what your break even is going to be. I think people get, so we work with a lot of startups, and we advise them the same. And when people just wing it, they kind of get lost early because things get out of control and they don't have that perspective there in the beginning to kind of compare and look back to. So I think writing that down, formalizing the plan, getting the numbers on paper, really helps a lot.
And I think that's a great piece of advice. And I mean, I think a lot of times, it's as much the exercise of having to go through, write that on paper, convince or know your numbers, or know what it will take and where you need to be at, is as much of the chore as actually executing. In other words, once you know, hey, this is where we need to be at, what we need to be doing, and kind of, where we're at financially, where our costs are at, where our break even's at, then you can say, okay, we've either got to, one, get to that number, or two, look to see how we might adjust that number so that it's more attainable. And I think in either case, it gives you a much better direction as to how to be successful. So, well, with that, if as we're wrapping up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, or find out more?
Sure, we have, they could reach us by email. Our website has a lot of information. We have, our phone numbers there. Email is contact@privatuscounsel.com. PRIVATUS council.com. Our website is privatuscounsel.com. So we also have social media accounts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and so on. So, we're accessible, a bunch of different ways. So, happy to, speak to anyone that's interested in working with us or for us, and, happy to take that forward.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, utilize you guys' legal services, whether in the U.S. or in Kuwait, and definitely a great opportunity to make sure that they have the resources in place to make sure their business is a success. So with that, thank you again, Adel, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show, and we'd love to hear from you. A couple more things as listeners: make sure to click, or for the podcast, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all the awesome episodes and journeys. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Thank you again, Adel, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you for having me.